Hi there. Today we are looking at how to sew this senator wear with truncated square pyramid design and assorted asymmetric hemline. If this is something you'd love to learn, please do stick and stay and let's do it together. This is how we're going to draft our basic bodice for the male. These are the following measurements we are going to need. Our chest is 42, the shoulder to shoulder or the back measurement is 17 and a half. We are doing a cross back of 16 and a half, across chest 15 and a half. The shirt length is 32, around arm 13, and the tummy measurement or the tummy circumference is also 38. We'll first draw a line to represent our starting line. We will do the shoulder to shoulder or the back measurement. And so it will be the back measurement divided by 2. Our back measurement is 17 and a half. And so 17 and a half divided by 2 is going to give us 8 and 3/4. So we mark it in 8 and 3/4 starting from here towards this direction. We add 1/4 of an inch for fixing our sleeve. Next will be to mark 2 inches below this line. This will serve as our shoulder slope line. We mark 3 inches to serve as our neck width. We then trace this very line we marked down here to touch the shoulder slope line. Then we connect the shoulder slope to the neck width. We will start from the 2 inches line all the way to where we had marked our 3 inches initially. Then we mark 4 inches from this very line down here. This is because we are going to flip this over to meet the front pattern. And so once we raise this by 2 inches, it means we are supposed to double it and then mark it from this line onto another line. We will then go ahead and cut this and that. We will make sure we extend this to surpass this very point because we are going to flip it over. Since our shoulder to shoulder has been distorted, we would mark it all over again and then we add our seam allowance for setting in the sleeve. Remember, this was supposed to be 8 and 3/4 plus a 1/4 seam allowance. With this done, we'll go ahead and mark our arm depth. The arm depth, as we've always said, is our round arm measurement divided by 2 plus 1 inch ease. And so our round arm is 13 and a half divided by 2 gives us 6 and 3/4 plus 1 inch ease, which then gives us 7 and 3/4. On this line, we mark our chest measurement divided by 4 and add our seam allowance. And so the chest measurement is 42 divided by 4 gives us 10 and a half plus 1 inch seam allowance. Then to get our cross back line, we would have to divide our arm depth into 3. We pick one and then starting from the chest line, we move outwards to mark that. And so the arm depth is 7 and 3/4 divided by 3 gives us 2 and a half approximately. Then we input our cross back measurement, which is 16 and a half divided by 2 gives us 8 and 1/4 plus 1/4 of an inch, 8 and a half. With our cross back point, our chest measurement divided by 4 and our shoulder to shoulder, we'll go ahead and construct our armhole to touch these 3 points. Then we move ahead to mark our shoulder to waist, our shoulder to hip, and then our shirt length. I did not actually measure these And so I'll do 18 inches from the shoulder to waist. I'll add 6 inches to get 24. That is the shoulder to hip. And then our shirt length, which is 32. If you'd want to be very specific, you can measure this. The tummy was supposed to be 38. So 38 divided by 4 gives us 9.5 plus 1 inch seam allowance. This is serving as our hip line. The hip measurement is same as the chest, 42. So divided by 4 gives us 10.5 plus our 1 inch seam allowance. We export the same measurement we had here also to our hemline. Lest I forget, we have to add on our hem allowance, and so we are doing 2 inches hem. We add that. Then we go ahead to connect these points. Bear in mind, if this was with a client whose belly is as equal as the chest, we would have just moved straight from the chest line all the way to the hip without tapering inward the waistline. Cut this out. We go ahead and draft our front bodice. Next, we are going to trace the outline onto this new paper for our front pattern. After the lines are transferred onto the front pattern, we'll place this on top like this, making sure that you'll be able to join the two shoulders, that is the front and the back shoulders together. We need to add our seam allowance on the top part so that when we join the two, it doesn't fall short. And so we'll add 1/2 inch. Then we cut off the excess. We will then place the front pattern right on the back pattern. This will enable us to get a perfect neck hole. Now, we are marking about 4 inches from the back all the way downwards. We'll then extend this line to meet the 4 inches we just marked here. Then we'll go ahead and measure the neck circumference to see what we get. We get 7.5, which means we are getting a neck circumference of 15 minus that seam allowance will be taken off when finishing the neck hole, meaning we are getting about 16 or 16.5, and so this is fine. If you get between 7 and 7.5 to 8, it's usually fine for an average body size. We'll go ahead and cut the front neck hole just to meet the back. One other thing we need to take notice of is that the across back measurement was a bit wider than the across chest measurement. And so having our across back measurement transferred to get our across chest line, we would have to input our across chest measurement plus the seam allowance for setting in our sleeve. The across chest measurement was 15.5 divided by 4 gives us 7 3/4 plus 1/4 inch, which gives us 8 inches. And so we would mark the 8 inches thereof. We'll then move ahead and refine our front armhole. But bear in mind, this would affect the part of the back pattern that flips forward. And so go ahead and cut both this and the front pattern. And so from here we are getting our front and our back patterns. We are going ahead to cut the sleeve. These are the measurements you would need for our sleeve. First, we need the arm depth measurement, which is taken from the top here to this part. And so we measure this. We get 7 3/4. The next, we would also need the armhole measurement. We get 10 1/2. We would need the bicep or the round arm measurement, which was taken on our client. And we'd also need the sleeve length, which was also taken on our client. These are the measurements we'll need for the sleeve. For this suit-like sleeve, we would first use our arm depth measurement. And so we mark our arm depth measurement from this part all the way downwards. Our arm depth measurement was 7 3/4, so we mark that. Then we'll mark our sleeve length, which is 10 inches. So 10 inches plus the 1/4 inch for which we are going to set the sleeve onto the dress. And so it will become 10 1/4. Comes to the sleeve length. The distance from my sleeve cap here all the way to the length is giving me 10 inches. But when it comes to the inseam, from this very part all the way to the length of our seam is also giving us 4 inches. And so we take the 4 inches off the sleeve length and the remainder becomes the depth of our armhole. Whereas this part is giving us 10 1/4, we are taking 4 inches off from this part plus the 1/4 inch seam allowance for setting in our sleeve. We'll then mark 7 inches from the top here all the way towards where we just marked our 4 inches. From the bottom here all the way to where we marked the 7 inches, we'll come up straight. We measure 4 1/2 inches from the fold here all the way to the midline. This line we just marked represents the distance from this very portion all the way to the midsection of our sleeve. Then we draw our cap from this direction all the way to the 4 inches, all the way to the 4 1/2 inches, and we curve inward to also touch the 7 inches we marked at the top here. We'll then measure the distance from the inseam all the way to the cap head. We get 11 inches. We compare this to our armhole, which was 10 1/2, meaning our sleeve hole is 1/2 inch bigger than the armhole, and this is perfect. Once it ranges between 1/2 and then 1 inch or even 2 inches, it's okay. We go ahead and then we cut this. This is the basic bodice block for the male, usually for senator wear and African wears. And so this is the sleeve that we're going to fix, and then we also have our back and then the front patterns, as you can see. We'll go ahead and then do the modifications if we want to do any other style. We are modifying the back. We would want to add vent onto the side, and so we will extend it by about 2 inches. We're extending the side seam by 2 inches. This is to start from where the hip line is. We'll go ahead and cut this. Because because the front has an asymmetric design on the hemline, it is appropriate to cut another piece which is unfold. And so we have used this to cut another unfold. Just as we did the extension of the side seam for the back, it is appropriate to do same for the front, so as to be able to sew our vent. We will cut this and do same for the other side. We draw a line to connect this point to the waistline up here. We mark 1 inch from the center towards this side. We draw another line 5 inches from this point also towards the side seam here. For the sake of the spike shape at the front hemline, I've decided to extend it by about 4 inches. We move downwards by 2 inches. Then we draw a line from here to connect it by taking off our 1 inch seam allowance. Remember, the side seam is here before adding the vent, and so we are taking 1 inch from this direction. We mark 1 inch from this part downwards, and we do same for this side as well. After we are done with this, we are adding 1/4 inch as seam allowance on all the edges, that is the down edges. But for the back, we'll maintain our length, and then we add our hem allowance. I'll go ahead and cut this out. For the truncated square pyramid, we mark 4 inches. Then from this point, we mark another 4 inches. We are doing 4 inches squares. We are marking 1 inch on this side, 1 inch on the other side, and then we mark 1 inch interval in between them as well, just as I'm doing. We are marking 1/4 inch from this very point up here, and we do 1/4 inch to the other side. That is for this square. We'll do the same thing for this side of the square. We do same for this and that. All the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 are all for this truncated square pyramid. When we go to the next box, we'll do the same thing as we did for this side, from this, that, this, and the other one. These 4 would also be for this. And that is how come you see 2 different boxes in between each of the big box we see here. So let's start. We are matching the points we've just marked all to the corresponding corners. So we are repeating this for all the other squares. And so we're going to cut this, leaving a few allowances on the edges. Bear in mind, this is a violin that we are going to use to interface the fabric. So we'll go ahead and do the cutting. We're using the interface for a 2 by 2 inch square. That will be for the green fabric. I've cut these 2 inch by 2 inch squares. There are 5 of them, and it's for each of these squares in between. I'll fuse them onto my contrast fabric. We have wrapped the fabrics around the violin, and so we have it 2 by 2 inches. The next step would be to transfer the squares we have here to the good side. And so I'm pinning the corners of each of these squares. Now the pins have appeared on the good side of our fabric. So I'm going to mark the squares here, and we'll continue. Once the markings have been transferred to the good side, we'll do away with the pins, place this on the various boxes, and then go ahead to stitch them on. We're going ahead to stitch our squares onto our design. What you're going to do next would be to cut off all along this line. We'll do same for this side, that side, and this side as well. So what you are doing is that we are going to sew each of these lines on the other as though we are sewing a dart. And so let's take this for example. We fold it on like this, and we stitch from this corner to that point as though we're sewing a dart. When it comes to this part, we create a notch, and we'll do the same. We'll still fold this on, and then we stitch as though we are stitching a dart. Right, and so we're going to repeat this throughout. So this is it after we stitched our truncated square pyramid. Very, very neat. What you're going to do is that because we don't want it to stretch as we wear it, we need to get it structured beneath. And so I have measured the distance from this point to that point. That is the whole width. And it gives us 3.5. I've used that 3.5 to also cut another fabric, but also I have fused it with an interface so that it gives it some structure under this. And so we're going to place it on as such, but I don't want to leave any space at the top here and beneath. And so I've also cut another fabric, which we are going to sew from this part, and then we will flip it over. And we're going to do the same for this other side. We sew this and we flip it over, and then we'll go ahead and make it the same width as the base of this whole thing. And so after stitching this, we are placing it right on top of the other one. And we'll go ahead and stitch this side to secure it on the base. And we'll do the same for the other side. So this is it. We're going to stitch it on. We're going to trim the edges. And we continue with it. After this is said and done, we are going to pick the front pattern to which we'll be placing our truncated square pyramid at about 2.5 inches from the center front towards this direction. And I'll align this accordingly. After this, we cut another fabric which will move from this side to cover up this space. And so this is what I've cut. But then I've remembered to also step this with an interface so that we'll be able to get a straight line on this edge. And so we're going to stitch this on like this, and then we flip it to the other side. After that, we've also cut another one that starts from here and covers this whole space as well. And so we'd also place that here. We stitch it on, and then we would also flip it to this other side. And so after stitching the two on, it's now time to flip this over. And then we shape the fabric just as we have our pattern. After the top part has been shaped, we can now go ahead and take off our pattern paper. We move on to run overlock stitches on this edge. After we are done with the top, let's look at how we added our allowances to that of the down part. And so this fabric is on fold at this very edge so that I wouldn't add any allowance to it. Number 3 also has this side of it on fold, but then the other side I made it a bit longer so that it would be able to lie under the number 2. When it comes to number 4, it was the same thing. This part was rather on fold, and I also made sure that it exceeded number 3 so that it would also be able to lie beneath it. And to have been able to arrange it like this, this is the first one, which is number 3. This is how it lies on number 4. And this is how number 2 also lies on number 3. And so for each of them, these parts, that is the hem parts, are opened and unfinished. And so I'll flip them to the wrong side and then stitch those. And so we're going to flip this to the wrong side like this. And then we will finish the hem. We'll go and run stitches on the hem, and then we turn it back so that we have the hem which is finished and also this side which is finished. That's what we're going to do for number 4. Now when it comes to number 3 too, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to sew the down part whilst we put the two good sides together and we stitch. After that, we turn it inside out. We would have the hem finished, and then we'd also finish this side, leaving the top part. When it comes to number 2, it's just going to be the same thing. So we're going to repeat this 3, and we'll come back and align it onto the top part of our front pattern. After finishing the hemlines, as we said, it's now time to stick the top onto it. And so we just flip this over and then we'll go ahead and stitch this on. When it comes to the sleeve, you'd realize that I did not add any hem allowance to it. This is because I decided not to stitch the hemline. Rather, after folding my fabric into 2 like this, I would as well fold it this way and then place my pattern on it, making sure that this side falls right on the hemline. As such, when this is cut, there wouldn't be the need to stitch the hemline again. We'll go ahead and join the front and the back shoulders together. We put the front and the back patterns together on the shoulder, and then we put the back facing also on top. And so we're going to stitch one side of the shoulder, which is the right shoulder, leaving the left shoulder unsewn. To cut the bias for piping our neckline, we'll mark 14 inches on this side and mark 14 inches on that side as well, both vertically and horizontally. Then we draw a line to connect the two. Then I mark a width of 2 inches. We'll then go ahead and cut this. After cutting this, we'll go ahead and fold it. After folding it into two, we will pick one and fold that one further into the middle. After folding this further on, we're going ahead to stitch the side that we did not fold all onto our neckline, but making sure that we do that at the wrong side first before we turn to the good side and top stitch. And so as we stitch, we pull the bias, leaving the neckline alone. And we pull just one side of the bias. That is exactly where we are sewing, not the entire thing. So this is how the wrong side looks like. We're going to turn to the good side and then we do the top stitching. And so this is the good side. We'll make sure that we flip this over to cover the stitch that we did initially, and then we stitch on the edge till we are done with piping our neckline. After piping our neckline, next step is to fix our zipper. I'll mark where it started from and where it ended. And then I'll close the zipper and mark the same thing on the other leg of the zipper. With this done, I would match the beginning and the end of our marking on the other side of our shoulder. And then we stitch the same thing. We change our straight stitch foot into our secret zipper foot. And so we align the zipper to the left side of our zipper foot. We'll repeat same for the other zipper. Then we can change our zipper foot back into a straight stitch foot to finish the zipper end. After fixing our zipper, we are now yet to fix our sleeve. This is what we do. The sleeve, as we had it, looked like this. And so we open the whole thing up and then flip this on to the other one so that it becomes one sleeve and you wouldn't have to finish the hem again. Now, we'll just mark the center piece of our sleeve as against the shoulder line we have here. Then we'll go ahead and stitch. After fixing the sleeve, I've also gone ahead and then knitting all the rough edges. And so it's now time to shape the dress. So go ahead and stitch our seam allowance off. We'll first take off the back vent and then stitch on it like this. After that, we'll go ahead to stitch our seam allowance off. After stitching the seam allowance, this is how we stitch the vent on. We will just fold from where our stitch got to before we turned to the vent. We fold the whole thing to the front part of our shirt. Like this. Making sure that we align the base perfectly well. And then we'll just go ahead and pin this and then stitch. So now we would open this up. We'll open this up like this and then we'll go ahead and stitch.